Welcome to the Lighthouse Financial Advisors Money Over 50 podcast with Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Lighthouse Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome everyone, I'm Michael Hogue. I'm here with Dallas Davison. Today we're going to talk about the notion of semi-retiring versus full retirement when you actually get to that stage in your working life. So, welcome Dallas.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, we want to talk about this one because it's something that we're seeing more and more of now. With all of our clients, one of the key things that we talk about is, what are their retirement goals? And most people kind of think of that as a date that they have in mind, and it's very much viewed as we'll work full time up until we reach 60 or 62 or whatever figure they may have in mind, and then they'll fully retire at that point in time. What we actually see more and more of as our clients are reaching those figures is that there tends to be more of a drift towards people cutting back on work hours, cutting back on responsibilities, and actually semi-retiring for a period of time before they actually transition to full retirement. So that was kind of why we just wanted to talk about that today and about some of the advantages and disadvantages, or the pros and cons of sort of semi-retirement versus retirement. But it's definitely something that we're seeing more and more, and I don't know about you, Michael, but I'm seeing it a lot with people who talk about they're wanting to retire earlier than the standard couple. So if they're saying, we want to fully retire at 55, it tends to be the case that there's some work that goes on after that. Would you say that's true for your clients as well?
I have a theory.
Here we go. Of course you've got a theory.
We love a good theory at Lighthouse Financial Advisors. So my theory is, so you see, we all talk about Generation Y and how they in many aspects they get blamed for being lazy and all those types of things, but one of the things that comes through with Generation Y is...
You're talking about Gen Y or Millennials?
Sorry, Millennials.
Yes, I was going to say, mate, I am a Millennial. I've copped all the heat about this, so I'm pretty sure you're talking about
my Millennials. What is Generation X and Generation Y? They're Millennials. Isn't Generation Y and Millennials the same thing?
I don't think there is a Gen Y anymore.
There is no Gen Y?
No, I think they got squeezed out into the other two.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
So let's refrain. Millennials. So they get a bad rap for not wanting, amongst other things, not working perceivably as hard as generations before them, for chopping and changing their careers and things like that. So, one of the themes that comes through with millennials is that they want to really push to be in a role that they're happy with and that they're passionate about. And money and home ownership and all those sorts of things become a secondary notion. So it's really about job satisfaction. I see that pushing up into at least one, if not two generations above them. So it's common now, just in the last few years, to see some of our clients, and you hear stories that are approaching retirement, and they're actually changing roles, or they're moving into something that they're more passionate about. I have one lady who's a client who works for a utilities company. She's in the process of leaving that high-paying job and moving to a job that's going to pay her a lot less, but it's a role in counselling that she's become really passionate about, and she's potentially going to do that for a lot longer. So she's going to push into her normal retirement years. I
think it's something that, like you were saying there, is that it pushes up into those generations, into those later generations, and I think that's also one that you start to see people in their 50s have normally paid, getting towards paying off a house, they've raised their kids. So I tend to hear a lot of people talking about, they've done all the things for everyone else up until this point in their life, and they're now wanting to wanting to focus more on what they actually want and what's important to them, rather than just being a good provider and taking care of everyone else. So that also I think is probably has a fair bit to do with why we're seeing that pushing up in that generation, is that they are just now at the point where they can potentially afford to make some of those changes where previously they couldn't. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I have another theory as well.
Of course.
My other theory is that when someone accumulates roughly 2/3 of where they need to be for their retirement savings, so they're 2/3 of the way there, or 2/3 of the balance there, they start to think about these things a lot more.
Yeah.
And admittedly, it's only my theory, but it's just a pattern that I've seen emerge. So as my clients get to 2/3 along the way of what we need to accumulate for them to fully retire, they start thinking about these things. They start questioning their job satisfaction now, and they start to look at other roles that would not necessarily pay them as much straight away, but they are much more passionate about and prepared to work beyond age 65. So, Dallas, you have some advantages to that. That I'll throw to you and you can talk to.
Yeah, and a lot of these different advantages or positives in looking at semi-retirement tie into some of the things that we've spoken about. So you touched on the main point there about having to have clients being 2/3 of the way towards where they need to be in terms of retirement savings. So one of the main advantages of a semi-retirement model is that you just need much less in retirement savings at a given point in time. So, obviously if you've got two couples and they're both planning on retiring from their current roles at age 60, if one of those couples they're both planning on earning $20,000 or $30,000 a year in part-time work in that first 5 years of retirement, they need to have substantially less. So there's obviously a couple of reasons for that. They need to draw much less money in that first 5 years, but they also have that additional 5 years to allow their retirement savings to continue to grow before they actually have to start drawing that out. Whereas the couple who go, we want to retire at 60, fully retired, don't ever want to have to work again, they need to do all of the work before they get to 60. So they need to be at a point in time where their retirement savings can fully fund their income needs for, a 30-year time frame is sort of what we work on there. So that's I guess one of the key advantages there, and like you touch on, is that if you're 2/3 of the way to your target for retirement and you start to go, okay, well, I don't really know if I want to keep doing what I'm doing for another 3 to 5 years. That's sort of the time when people tend to go, okay, well, if I could move across into this other role that I'm passionate about, or I think I'll enjoy more, or that is more meaningful to me, they're happy to work for 7, 8, 10 years rather than 5 years, because it's going to put them in the same position at that later date. So that's kind of the main advantage that we see, is that you can just afford to have a lot less in retirement savings at an earlier stage. So that also flows back through when you're looking at that with couples between 55 and 60. If they're not planning on drawing from their retirement savings until 65, they can generally afford to go on more of those holidays and do things like that, because they're not having to just drive everything into their super fund and focus purely on growing that. So that's probably there's sort of the main one. As a part of that as well, what I guess a secondary component is that you get to pay less tax, which is normally a pretty exciting thing for most people who've been paying tax for 40 years already. So obviously if you're earning $20,000 a year for 5 years, you're going to pay basically no tax on that income over that 5 years. And if you compare that to earning $100,000 in 1 year, with the way a progressive tax system works, if you'd earn that $100,000 in 1 year, you're going to pay about $25,000 of that in tax. So, as I say, particularly for a couple, if you can both earn $20,000, you've replaced $40,000 of your income combined without having to pay $1 in tax. So,
it's a good point. Tax minimisation is obviously a big part of what we do. And coming up with a tax plan, we talk to people about their options. Obviously makes a big difference if they're working and they can both earn a certain amount of income and spread that across 2 tax brackets and pay no tax. It really takes the pressure off what they need to even if they need to partially draw some money from their retirement savings as they enter partial retirement or semi-retirement, then their retirement savings still, with the right investment strategy, compounds out and makes a lot of money. I mean, if you look at if you're at age 60 and together you have circa, let's say $1 million in your retirement savings, then even earning $20,000 a year in tax-free income, if you're working and sort of semi-retiring, your retirement savings, your superannuation fund, collectively will earn, with the right investment strategy, somewhere between $60,000 to, let's say, $80,000 per year in investment returns, which is a lot of money, of course. Like that still compounds out to quite a lot, even though not as much as going in to the fund at that stage.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's sort of, like we said, it tends to be a bit more of a grey area where you're not living fully on the returns that you've got on your retirement savings, and you're not living fully on your income that you're earning from work. It's normally a combination of the two. So you can replace a bit of your income through work, replace a bit of your income with drawing a small amount out of your retirement savings, and have that still continue to grow, which is what you're saying there, Michael. So the second point that I've sort of noticed, which is an advantage of the semi-retirement model, is that it's a much easier way to stay relevant in the job market. So for a lot of people, we can come up with a great sort of strategy or plan over 10 years, but there are a lot of moving parts and things that people just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So it can be hard to say, well, this is how much income you will need every year for the next 10 years. So in a lot of cases, people's big concern of retiring is that, well, if they retire and something changes and they need to go back to work, or they realise that they can't actually live on the retirement income that they thought they could, it's normally not as easy to just jump straight back into the workforce, particularly as people get older. It's normally harder to go straight back in if you've been out of work for a year or two. So that's kind of where another advantage is that keeping a bit of an eye on the fire, or keeping on top of what's changing in the industry that you're working in just by working part-time, is that it's obviously going to make you much more employable if you do decide to turn around and go back to full-time work. It's easier to step up from, say, 2 days a week to 5 days a week than to go from not working or not having any of those industry connections, or not being on top of the latest changes in your industry. So that can be another big advantage there.
Yeah, certainly. It's a good point. So you are staying relevant in the job market. The other thing that I've been seeing, and it's a shift worldwide, of course, is that employers are more happy to have people work in not exactly on their terms, but certainly in a
more
reduced
flexible
employment arrangements, which are great. If you are a specialist in your field, which a lot of our clients are, the notion of actually having to show up every week is not always required as well. So some of our clients have had success working for their employers on a contract basis, and might work full time for 3 months, and then they'll take 3 months off and go travelling. They'll come back and work full time again for 3 months. So they do project based work. And certainly the gig economy with the worldwide push as well, where you can pick up and put down your job. So if you're an Uber driver, for example, you can pick that up and put that down at any point in time. We even have clients. I have one lady who's a client who is a dental hygienist, and she's just left her job with Queensland Health and has moved to her own practice, and it's a related, not exactly what she did for Queensland Health, but it's a related field. she's really, really passionate about what she's doing there. At the moment she's working 1 day a week, but the idea is to increase that to 2, to possibly 3 days per week in the future, to work beyond 65, because she's really, really passionate about that. And we've discussed travel in the future in terms of being able to
go and work somewhere for a period of time.
Yeah, go and work. So technology will actually help her role quite a lot, where she'll be able to. She has a daughter that lives in the United States and is married over there with some children, so she'll be able to go to the States. She'll be able to talk to her clients back here via Skype and manage that period of time that she's away for 2 or 3 weeks. So flexibility is a really, really key theme here, and it's a fantastic thing to see. And we also, I mean, you've seen this before as well with clients that have, we've told them that they're in a position where they can retire. They've handed in resignation notice, and their boss has said, "Oh, I didn't see this coming at all. We really, really want you, and what can we do to make your role easier? We want to keep you." So they've been able to actually. Sorry, they didn't hand their notice in 10 years before, because their employers have actually
adjusted their role,
and take away some of the stuff that they didn't really like so much, and the reported levels of job satisfaction coming back are much higher when we've been able to tell people that they financially have enough to retire. Oftentimes they continue to work because they know that they can resign at a moment's notice. They're financially ready to retire. So
and
it's really great.
That's, I guess, that ties into the next point, or the next advantage there is like you were saying, that for a lot of people it takes time to adjust to the idea that they are able to retire. So like we say, working full time and then reaching a point in time and then stopping and not working at all can be a massive shock for a lot of people. So especially when we say many of our clients are experts in their field, and they are very well respected and get a lot of meaning out of their work, and for that all to come to a halt suddenly can be can be hard emotionally for a lot of people. So that's where that semi-retirement, or making those changes, and as you just said, Michael, for many people it's just about going back to their employer and saying, okay, well, I'm doing this role 5 days a week. These 2 days are actually where I think I'm most valuable and what I enjoy the most. So their employer's happy to shift the other 3 days of work across to someone else who wants that role, and just keep them on doing the work that they're most passionate and most happy to do. And the employer's happy because they're still able to use their expertise. So that's another one that I see a lot of, is that it does tend to take time, not just to adjust to the idea of retirement or stepping back, but practically from how do people fill their time. We see that all the time when you're talking to someone about, what are you going to do when you're retired, and they'll say, I'm going to go fishing. Okay, well, you'll go fishing every day for a week, and then you'll be sick of it and sunburnt and hungover, and what are you going to do sort of next week? So that can be another good one, is that if you go from working 5 days a week to 2 or 3 days a week, you've then got time to build some other interests and some other hobbies, for example, while still having some structure around those work days.
It's a very good point. Through health improvements in medical technology, we're living a lot longer in retirement, and we're living healthier lives as well. So it is. I mean, coupling that with people that are actually moving from a role that they don't necessarily like, and maybe even a high-paying role, and then moving into something they're a lot more passionate about. And in many respects, they're taking, because they're reducing their hours as well, they're taking a big pay cut, but they're really, really passionate about it. And this is coming late in their life at age 60 so they're really happy to continue to do that. That new passionate role, well beyond 65. just takes a lot of the pressure off their retirement savings and superannuation balance, of course.
Yeah, and that's the sort of the last advantage I wanted to talk about today was for many people the big fear is that I'll work to a certain age, I'll retire, and then there'll be a bear market or a period of poor investment returns. And so you hear this a lot with people that they know someone who retired just before the global financial crisis and had to go back to work a year later and found it hard to find the right role, all that kind of thing. So it ties a bit into what you were saying there, Michael, around for people that can push into a role that they're happy to do forever and a day. Generally, it takes a lot of pressure off what the investment returns are on their retirement savings and their super balance. So if investment returns are poor in those kind of early years of their semi-retirement, well, they'll just say, okay, well, I'll just keep working part-time until I reach the point where my retirement savings have grown to allow me to fully retire. So it takes some of that what we call sequencing risk off the table. So if in your early years of retirement you have lower than expected returns, if you're already replacing, as we said before, if you're already earning $40,000 of your income needs from work, there's really only a small amount generally that's being topped up from that. So it might be a case of going, okay, well, I'll work part-time until age 65, and then if your retirement savings aren't where they need to be, most people are happy to continue working in that role for the extra couple of years. Whereas for someone who's working on the full retirement model, they may not be enjoying their work, and so they'll reach the point where they thought they were going to be able to retire. Investment markets are down and they find they have to work for longer, and it's normally a bit of a kick in the guts for those people because they were really hanging out for that moment in time when they could fully stop. So that's sort of the last advantage. It takes away a bit of that risk of what are investment returns likely to be in the last years of work and in those early years of retirement for a lot of people.
Yeah, certainly. And also you have some disadvantages that we need to discuss as well. So
yeah, and that's I guess the next part of it is that it all sounds like all beer and skittles at the moment, but it's not quite as easy as that. So like anything in life, each of these advantages tend to come with a disadvantage in some ways. So the first thing is that for most people in your, like I say, for an expert in your field or a specialist in your field, you spent 30, 40 years building knowledge and building your expertise. So for most people, your 50s and 60s are really your peak earning capacity. So if you're putting the tax side of it apart, if you're currently earning a relatively high income on a per hour basis, it can be hard to find part-time work that allows you to earn that same amount. So like we just said, this isn't a matter of saying everyone should do this, because I have other clients that sort of have looked at this and gone, well, if I'm earning a big income now, rather than saying I'll retire earlier and have to try and find part-time work for 5 or 10 years, they just go, well, I'll work in my current role for another year, earn a lot of money in that year and put that aside and not have to stress about will I be able to do that. So that's, I guess, the key trade-off there is that if you can have the best of both worlds, if you can move into a role or into a part-time job that allows you to earn a similar income as what you're on a per hour basis now, then that's great. But for a lot of people, that may not be the case. As we say, that it is getting more common, but there still are a lot of roles that you're only able to earn those bigger incomes if you are there full time and really putting in the hours. The second part of that is that, like we said, depending on that occupator, even if you are completely flexible about what you do and you're not that fussed about what work you are doing part-time, and Bunnings is the one we hear all the time. Everyone who wants to semi-retire wants to go and work at Bunnings. They're gonna have a lineup out the door of people in their 60s who work there. You've got one. So he might be able to help all their other clients get a foot in the door there, get that job.
He was made redundant and moved Bunnings and loves it.
Yeah.
So
And that's like I say, for many people, they're not that fussed around what that work is. It's just one of those things to bear in mind, is that it's normally not as easy as just saying, I'll just get a part-time job, because there may be a tougher job market. In some situations, your part-time employees are the first ones to go. If there's a bit of a downturn, most people are wanting to keep on their young full-time staff, and so if you're just chiming and doing a couple of days a week, you might find that your hours are the first ones to get cut in a sort of a part-time role. It is one of those things that, like we say, if you have those marketable skills and you have that expertise in an area, that makes life a lot easier. It reminds me of my brother. I think I was telling you about this, Michael, that when he was working as a labourer in construction in different areas and just all over the place when he was in his 20s, and he fell off a roof and broke his leg. And then when I said to him, what are you gonna do now? He goes, I might just go and get a job in an office. And didn't understand that he had no qualifications or no real skills to just go and get an office job. It wasn't as easy as just going and picking one up off the shelf. So It's a matter of being realistic about, is it going to be feasible for you to find the type of work that you're going to be happy to do part-time, and happy to do that for an extended period of time.
Certainly.
The other one is that, like we said, it may be out of your hands finding that part-time work, both in terms of, like we said, the economy, or whether you can find the right role that's the right fit for you. But also, the other way that can be taken out of your hands is by health changes. So, as you said before, Michael, most people are living for longer, they're living healthier lives for longer. But again, we're sort of relying on a bit of an average there. So for most people, they're physically capable of working well into their 60s, but it is something that needs to be taken into account, is that not everyone is going to be able to do that from a health standpoint as well, is that there needs to be some fallback plan around that, because for most people, when you're in that age range, it's also not a time when you've got income protection insurance or anything like that that's able to kick in. So it's really about saying, well, if we're reliant on that income, what do we do if we can't get that work due to either the role just isn't there, or B, if your health has changed and you're not able to do that due to that.
That's a good point. So the saying is that we take our health for granted, and most people do. So it is a good idea to get ahead of the curve in terms of your retirement planning.
Yeah.
And certainly build in those contingencies.
Yeah.
In case you have to, in case it is taken out of your hands from an earlier retirement, or a partial retirement, or a time without work, even through unemployment for a period of time.
Yeah.
So certainly planning for that and building those contingencies into the overall financial plan is a prudent thing to do.
Yeah, and that sort of ties into the last, I guess, disadvantage of a semi-retirement type model, is that generally people are looking at a semi-retirement because they don't want to have to put away as much money of their income in their sort of 50s and potentially early 60s. So what that means is that, again, that's fine if you can rely on that part-time income to supplement that, but if you're not putting as much away earlier, it generally means there's less time for your investment returns to do the work. So this kind of ties into, like I was saying, with the sequencing risk, is that if the earlier that you have that money invested, the longer that you have that, any volatility or anything like that isn't going to affect you as badly, because you've got more time to have the good years as well as the bad years. So that's kind of the flip side of the sequencing risk issue there, is that the best way to minimise that sequencing risk is to put that money in 10 years earlier. And now for many people that's not feasible, but it is one to be aware of, is that if you're not putting as much money away earlier, generally you're going to have to do more of the work. So your money's not working as hard for you for as long. So you are going to have to work for longer.
There's a big difference between 5 years. So people often come to us for the first time at age 55, and we typically have 10 years, or the last 10 years of their working life to put together the financial plan, and for most people, for most couples, we can add $500,000 to their final retirement savings balance, other than what they would have had already if they didn't come to see us. So if someone comes to see us at 50, though, instead of 55, that extra 5 years compounds out to just such a much bigger number, because it's just that extra 5 years of compounding returns over the time, and you also have then a lot more contingencies built in, because you have there's more levers to adjust over that period of time.
Yeah.
So it all does start with planning as early as possible.
Yeah, and that's probably, I guess, a pretty good place to wrap up to some degree, is that we've listed a heap of pros and cons and things to think about here, but like a lot of things with your retirement planning, there's no black and white answer as to what you should do, what you could do. It's really just a matter of having a think about what you might want those last years of your work life to look like, and the earlier we can start to plan for that, the better. So I've got some clients that are actually in there that have just turned 50, and like you were saying, Michael, that this is something they're starting to look at, is okay, well, in their late 50s and early 60s, they might want to go with a model like this, a semi-retirement. Now, if they're looking at that at age 50, we still to some degree have the last 10 years of full-time work. So they're working full-time from 50 to 60. They've got a lot more scope to take advantage of these things. It's not something where we've got to try and jam it all in and make it all work with only a couple of years' notice. So it's definitely something that is worth thinking about, both in those couple of years before retirement, but particularly 5-10 years before is definitely something that can be a goal or something for people to work towards.
That's a great point. I think it's a great place to wrap up. So certainly, what's important to us for our clients, it's not all just about the numbers. It is important that they live a good balanced life and do the things that they want to be able to do. So that includes travel and flexibility and working. So I think it's a great place to wrap up, and we'll leave it there, and certainly we'll talk to you all again soon with our next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Lighthouse Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.